Here is a powerful, emotionally rich speech based on the title, I Spent 30 Years Hating Islam, but One Moment, written in simple English with natural flow, deep emotional tone, and designed to engage the listener or viewer fully. I spent 30 years hating Islam, not because I understood it. Not because I had read the Quran or studied its teachings. I hated it because I was told to. I was raised in a world that fed me fear, fed me lies. Every time I turned on the news, I saw anger, war, and violence, and I was told that that's Islam. I never questioned it. I never stopped to ask myself if what I was seeing was the truth, or just a small part of a much bigger picture. For 30 years, I carried this hatred like a heavy stone in my chest. I judged people without knowing their hearts. I believed things I had never researched. I thought I understood a religion that I had never taken even one moment to truly see. But then something changed. One moment, one quiet, unexpected, powerful moment. I was walking through a marketplace, just minding my business, when I saw a Muslim man helping an old woman who had dropped her groceries. He wasn't trying to show off. No one was filming him. It was just a kind human act. But it struck me hard. Because he looked exactly like the people I had learned to fear. Beard, long robe, calm expression. Yet he was helping. He was gentle. He smiled. That moment didn't make sense to the version of the world I had been taught. It cracked something inside me, just a little. That small crack grew bigger with time. I started to pay more attention. I noticed how Muslims treated their families with deep love and respect. I noticed their discipline during prayer, their generosity during charity, their strength in faith. And I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was wrong with the way I had seen them for so long. The hate didn't match the reality in front of me, so I did something I had never done before. I picked up the Quran. I wanted to find the hate, the anger, the violence that I had been told existed in its pages, but I didn't find any of that. I found peace. I found words that spoke to my soul, words about mercy, about patience, about the importance of helping others and staying humble. I found stories of prophets I already knew, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, spoken about with such love and reverence. I found verses that asked me to think, to reflect, to use my reason. I felt ashamed of the years I had spent building walls in my heart. Ashamed of the times I had looked at Muslims and thought the worst of them, ashamed of how blind I had been, but I also felt something else. I felt hope, because Islam didn't reject me. It didn't punish me for the years I had spent hating it. It welcomed me. It invited me to learn. It gave me the space to ask questions, to grow, to change. I realized then that the problem had never been Islam. The problem was my ignorance. The problem was my fear. The problem was the lies I had accepted without seeking the truth. That one moment in the marketplace became the turning point of my life. It led me to knowledge. It led me to understanding. It led me to faith. Today, I don't just no longer hate Islam. I love it. I admire it. I follow it. It gave me peace I never knew I was missing. It gave me clarity in a world full of noise. It taught me how to be patient, how to forgive, how to be grateful even in pain. It gave me a relationship with God that was not built on fear, but on closeness and trust. And it all started with one moment. To anyone out there who carries hate for something you don't truly understand, I ask you this: have you ever paused? Have you ever looked beyond what you've been told? Have you ever dared to seek truth with your own eyes, your own heart? For 30 years, the speaker lived with a deep hatred for Islam, a hatred that wasn't born out of experience, study, or any direct encounter with the religion. It was something picked up through the environment, through conversations, media headlines, political speeches, and the unconscious biases of society. The fear and mistrust weren't questioned. They were accepted as truth. When people hear something over and over again from sources they trust, it's easy to believe it must be right. This is how the seeds of ignorance grow into deeply rooted prejudice. The speaker never stopped to ask where this hate was coming from or why it existed in the first place. There were no personal reasons, no moments of harm caused by Muslims, no deep study of Islamic teachings that led to disagreement. It was simply a reflection of the culture around them, a culture that misunderstood, misrepresented, and often vilified Islam. Many people who hold strong negative views towards certain groups or beliefs do so without any real knowledge. They believe what they see on the news, what they hear in social media debates, or what they're told by others who also haven't sought the truth for themselves. They carry second-hand anger and fear like it's their own. That was the speaker's reality. Islam to them was never something to be understood. It was something to be feared. The religion was painted in broad, dark strokes: violence, extremism, oppression. These were the images repeated over and over again. There was no room for complexity, no space for compassion, no opportunity to learn. The speaker never met Muslims, never had a conversation with someone who actually followed the faith, never entered a mosque or held a Quran in their hands. But still the hatred felt real. It felt justified. That's the danger of ignorance. It makes falsehoods feel like truth. For years, that hatred sat quietly in the background, influencing thoughts, shaping opinions and closing off possibilities. It was never openly challenged because challenging it would mean opening the door to doubt. It would mean admitting that everything believed for decades might be wrong. That's not easy to do. People don't like being wrong, especially about things they've felt strongly about for a long time. So it's easier to keep the door shut, to avoid uncomfortable questions, and to stay in the comfort of certainty, even if that certainty is based on lies. The speaker's story shows how hate can live in someone's heart without them ever fully understanding why. It reveals how easily society can pass down biases and how dangerous it is to never question them. Hate built on ignorance is one of the most common kinds and also one of the most painful to confront. Because when the truth finally comes, when the light of understanding starts to shine, it doesn't just change the mind, it shakes the entire foundation of a person's beliefs. It brings guilt, regret, and a painful awareness of how many years were wasted living in darkness. The speaker didn't hate Islam because they knew it. They hated it because they didn't. Because everything they thought they knew was either false or incomplete, and once they saw even a small glimpse of the truth, everything began to change. That's the power of confronting ignorance. It breaks chains, it opens minds, it invites transformation. But it all starts with the courage to admit that what you've believed for so long might not be the whole story. That's where growth begins. That's where healing begins. And for the speaker, that's where a new life began, one no longer shaped by hate, but by truth. It was just an ordinary day when everything changed for the speaker. They were walking through a busy marketplace, not expecting anything special, just going about their routine. The noise of the crowd, the scent of food, the hustle of daily life, it all felt familiar. But in the middle of all that noise, something small happened that became unforgettable. An old woman dropped her groceries. No one around seemed to notice or care. People walked past her, too busy or distracted to stop. But one man did. A Muslim man, dressed in traditional clothes with a calm and kind presence, gently walked over, picked up the items, and helped the woman with quiet dignity. He didn't make a big deal of it. He didn't look for applause. He simply smiled, offered his help, and moved on. That single act stopped the speaker in their tracks. It might have looked like a small moment to everyone else, but to them it was life-changing. For 30 years, they had carried a heavy, silent hatred toward Islam. And in those 30 years, no book, no argument, no political debate had made them question that hatred. But this one act of kindness did. Why? Because it was real. It was human. It wasn't part of a script or a lecture. It wasn't someone trying to prove a point. It was just one person doing something good, something gentle, something honest. What made it so powerful was the contrast. The speaker had always seen Muslims through a distorted lens. They were told Muslims were angry, violent, dangerous. But now, in front of their own eyes, they were seeing the exact opposite. There was no aggression, no hate, no danger, only kindness, and it shook the speaker deeply. It forced them to confront a question they had avoided for years. If this man was Muslim and he was kind, then maybe everything they believed wasn't true. Maybe they had been wrong all this time. The mind resists change. It clings to old beliefs, especially when those beliefs have shaped someone's identity for decades. But the heart has its own way of understanding. It feels truth in ways the mind can't always explain. And in that moment, the speaker's heart recognized something pure. That simple act of kindness tore through years of hate. It didn't require words or explanations. It just needed to be witnessed. It cracked the walls the speaker had built inside them, walls made of fear and misinformation. And once there was a crack, light began to seep through. This moment is proof that the most powerful form of truth is often lived, not spoken. People can argue about religion, culture, and politics forever, but no argument is stronger than the example of a good heart. When someone acts with genuine compassion, without any agenda, it speaks louder than speeches. It becomes something that people remember. It creates change without force. And that is exactly what happened here. The speaker didn't convert on the spot. They didn't suddenly let go of everything they believed, but something important had started. Doubt had entered the space where hate used to live. Curiosity had replaced judgment, and that shift, that tiny movement of the soul, came from one quiet moment of kindness. It's easy to underestimate the power of small actions, but sometimes one gentle deed can change the entire course of someone's life. It can challenge everything they thought they knew. It can replace fear with love. And for the speaker, that was the beginning of everything. One man's kindness was the spark that began to melt 30 years of frozen hatred. And from that spark, a whole new journey was born. At that moment in the marketplace, something inside the speaker began to shift. The hatred they had carried for so long didn't feel as solid anymore. Doubt had quietly entered their heart, and with that doubt came curiosity. They began to wonder if they truly understood Islam at all. That simple act of kindness had challenged everything they thought they knew. For the first time in their life, they felt the urge to seek the truth for themselves, not just accept what others had told them. It was not an easy step to take. 30 years of negative thoughts don't vanish overnight. But the desire to learn grew stronger, and the speaker realized they could no longer live with unanswered questions. They started with the Quran, not to argue, not to disprove, but to understand. They opened it with hesitation, unsure of what they might find. They expected harsh words, anger, maybe even hate. But what they found was something entirely different. The words were calm, wise, and filled with deep meaning. They read about mercy, forgiveness, patience, gratitude, and the constant call to reflect, to think, and to find peace through connection with God. The teachings were not about division, but unity. Not about hate, but love. The verses spoke about justice, compassion, and caring for the poor, the orphan, and the traveler. It was a message of humanity and humility. The more they read, the more they realized how far their understanding had been from the truth. Islam wasn't what they had been shown in media clips or political speeches. It was deeper, more spiritual, and filled with a sense of purpose. The speaker found stories of the prophets they already knew: Moses, Noah, Abraham, Jesus, and they were honored and loved in the Quran. These were names they had grown up hearing, but now they were seeing them through a new light. They realized that Islam shared a foundation with other faiths, a shared belief in one God, in morality and accountability, and in living a life of kindness and truth. It wasn't just the text that changed them, it was what the text made them feel. They started to understand the discipline behind prayer, the beauty in fasting, the purpose of modesty, and the strength in charity. Islam wasn't just a religion, it was a way of life, a system designed to help people grow, improve, and stay close to their Creator. The speaker felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: peace. A calmness entered their heart as they read. It wasn't emotional manipulation or fear-driven belief. It was clarity. It was truth that spoke directly to their soul. This journey of seeking truth wasn't easy. They had to confront their old beliefs, their pride, and their guilt. They had to admit they had been wrong. But with every page they turned, they felt lighter. They felt like they were being introduced to something sacred, something that had been hidden from them for years. They watched lectures, visited a mosque, and even spoke with Muslims. Every step brought more understanding. The hate began to dissolve, not because someone told them to let it go, but because it had no place left to stand. It couldn't survive in the presence of truth. That one moment in the marketplace had opened the door, but it was the speaker's courage to walk through that door, to read, to question, to reflect, that truly changed everything. Seeking the truth led to transformation. It broke down the walls of ignorance and replaced them with the foundation of knowledge. It gave them something far more powerful than hate ever could: peace, purpose, and a deep connection to something greater than themselves. After spending 30 years hating Islam, the speaker expected rejection. They thought that if they ever approached the religion they had once opposed, they would be turned away, judged, or reminded of their past. But what they found was the exact opposite. Instead of harshness, they were met with compassion. Instead of judgment, they found understanding. Islam didn't look at them through the lens of their past hatred. It looked at them as someone seeking truth, and that was enough. This realization left a deep impact on the speaker. It wasn't just the teachings that touched them, it was how the religion treated someone like them, someone who had hated it for so long. Islam's door was not closed to them. In fact, it was wide open. This experience shattered another misconception they had carried for years. They had believed that Islam was rigid, unwelcoming, and closed off to outsiders, but their journey proved the opposite. Islam embraced them, not for being perfect, but for being honest in their search for meaning. The people they met welcomed their questions with patience. The scholars they spoke to didn't get angry at their past views. They gently guided them, and the teachings of the Quran spoke directly to their heart, reminding them that God's mercy is greater than all things. Verses about forgiveness, about God's closeness to the sincere seeker, brought them to tears. It was hard to believe that after all the years of carrying hate, there was still a place for them in this faith. But there was. Not just a place, but a purpose. Islam doesn't expect perfection from anyone. It doesn't ask that a person has a flawless past before they are worthy of guidance. It only asks for sincerity, for the intention to seek the truth and walk the path of righteousness. That is what the speaker gave, and that is what was accepted. This truth changed how they saw everything. They had spent so much time thinking they were unworthy, that they had done too much damage to ever be welcome. But Islam reminded them that no heart is too far gone if it turns back to its creator. This forgiveness wasn't just comforting, it was healing. It gave them the strength to let go of shame and to move forward with purpose. They began to see Islam not just as a religion, but as a lifeline, a way to start over, a path that didn't ignore their past, but gave it meaning. Their hatred had not been wasted. It became the darkness that made the light so much more powerful. Their ignorance made their learning more valuable. Their doubt made their faith more genuine. Everything they had once used as reasons to stay away from Islam became the very things that deepened their connection to it. This sense of being welcomed, of being embraced despite the past, became a message they wanted to share with others. So many people carry guilt, fear, or anger, thinking they can never be accepted. But Islam showed the speaker that transformation is always possible. That even the hardest heart can soften, that even the most distant soul can return. It's not about how long someone has been away, it's about how sincerely they wish to come back. The speaker's story is proof that Islam doesn't shut its doors. It invites. It heals. It invites. It heals. It lifts people from the weight of their past and gives them a future rooted in peace and truth. And for the